All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Performance Racing Industry webinar. I am Dr. Jamie Meyer, the president of PRI. We've got a really informative video coming up, so stay tuned. We're going to talk about several programs to help keep your racetrack open. So again, welcome everybody. Welcome to PRI. As you know, the country's been going through some unprecedented times because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the racing industry has been hit hard. PRI organization has been working around the country to help our affiliates in many ways. We're going to talk about them today, and we're also going to introduce you to our ambassador program. So this is, again, the first in what we hope is several videos putting out information to help our industry. We're using our GoToWebinar app. You can type in a question in the screen and we'll get back to you. This is going to be a pre-recorded session, but type in your questions and we'll have a PRI representative get back to you. All right, so up first, we're going to talk about what PRI is doing to help you right now. If you go to the performanceracing.com website, the PRI homepage, you'll find several areas there where we can help you and your company. We've got a state-by-state reopening guide that will give you the information about your local governments, local and state governments, and what you need to do to get your facility up and running. We also have a track promoter helpline. It's manned 24 hours a day. If you're a track promoter and you need help, you can call that number and we will help you. PRI is there to help. And then our lobbying efforts. We are an advocacy group, and that's a lot about what we're going to be talking about this afternoon, about what we're doing to work with officials around the country to help our affiliates. And again, you can find all of that at the URL listed right there, performanceracing.com, and a lot of information there to help you. All right, so I want to introduce you to one of the important players in the story, team member at PRI, Christian Robinson, our Director of State and Government Affairs. Good afternoon, Christian. Great to have you working with the PRI team.
Thanks, Dr. Meyer. It is a total pleasure to be here with you today and with the ambassadors that you're going to introduce here in a few moments. I'm coming to you live from Washington, well, recorded actually, but we've got a saying here. It's if you aren't at the table, then you're on the menu. I hate to use such a swampy expression, but it's absolutely true. As our economy rebounds and each of the 50 states chart their reopening paths forward, we're committed to ensuring that racetracks and motorsports have a seat at the table with their decision makers across the country, whether or not it's members of Congress working to make sure we pass the RPM Act, or with your local health department to make sure that your safety plan gets approved. The reality is that racetracks play a critical role in the economy. Not only do you all create jobs and revenue, but you are providing a morale boost to residents right now, and frankly, we all need it. The good news is, as Dr. Meyer mentions, is that our government affairs team is ready to assist you and get you back on the track and racing. Our team has decades of experience, and we've built a large network of federal and state legislators on both sides of the aisle that are friendly to the cause that we can call on when needed. We've also built a tremendous grassroots army of consumers and fans that we can deploy to contact key elected officials when we need them. Similarly, on that note, your customers and your business partners are your greatest allies. We can help you mobilize them to the cause and provide them with talking points when they advocate on your behalf. These are voters, and they have a huge influence with elected officials. They also are passionate about your facilities and have tremendous stories to tell about how what you do is critical to the local economy and to each of its residents, to its citizens. Now, as Dr. Meyer mentioned, we're monitoring each of the 50 states as they reopen, and we're doing it with a particular eye on racing. We're updating these pages on a daily basis as we learn more to keep you informed and up to the minute with the latest happenings. The bottom line is we're here to help, And as he mentioned, we've got a racing hotline that is staffed 24/7 to assist you. You can always reach us at racinghelp@performanceracing.com, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can. There is no American pastime as important as racing, and we are here to ensure that it stays that way. And I'll hand things back over to you, Dr. Meyer.
It's awesome, Christian. No, thank you for that. And you're using those exact same talking points when you talk to the local officials when we're talking and working through some of these issues right now, right?
Absolutely. We use the same talking points because they're 100% true and they're effective.
Yeah, that's great. And when we call on racers, the response is always tremendous, right?
It is. We send a lot of alerts on different issues, and the ones on racing are always our most popular and have the best response. So, race fans are some of the most passionate in the country, and when it comes to issues like this, it shows.
Well, I'll certainly thank our constituents for that. And as you know, Christian, we're going to need them more than ever going forward. So, all right, let's move on together, because I know you've been working with the ambassadors here for almost 2 months. I want to introduce our listeners to a new program at PRI. We've hired 3 experts in the racing community. We lovingly call them our ambassadors, and they are out there doing goodwill on your behalf. So we're going to introduce them individually, but I want to introduce them collectively right now. They are Tom DEERY, Gene Bergstrom, and Frank HAWLEY. These 3 gentlemen have been working on your behalf across the country, working with you, Christian, extensively, literally going track by track and helping folks across the country. So let's get into it, and we'll move to our first ambassador. We're going to get some information from each one of them. And again, we'll introduce each one individually. The program has been successful in some areas, Christian. We've met challenges in others. We can talk about that a little bit more. But again, the importance here is that without a track operating, we don't have racers, we don't have race fans, the manufacturers can't build parts. This right now is really the holdup in our racing economy. And again, the key to this is working with those officials, either locally or at the state level. And Christian, we're probably going to talk about that quite a bit here this afternoon. So let's move on in the deck, and we'll get our ambassadors queued up. So Tom DEERY, who has spent a lifetime in the circle track world, from the world of outlaws, an incredible gentleman and an ambassador to racers around the country, around the world. Tom, it's great to have you working with PRI. I want to welcome you into the discussion, and we'll move things along here. Tom, good afternoon.
Thank you, Jamie, and good afternoon. It's also a pleasure to be joining you all on this webinar today. It's also a great honor to be part of this initiative, this initial program of the ambassadors. It should show to everybody in the industry the PRI's commitment to the industry as we continue to grow the involvement outside of the many things that PRI has done. Among the many issues that exist in the racing world, the pandemic really gave us a platform to jumpstart our efforts in the ambassador program, and it's been a lot of interesting times working through this, using the COVID restrictions that were put in place by various governmental agencies as the challenge. It really gave us the reason to step up and to try to bring the industry together. One of the things that PRI did right off the get-go, and you'll find this on the PRI website that Christian mentioned, was aggregating all of the various COVID response plans, both from different sanctioning bodies, from the CDC, from every resource that we could find. You get them all in one spot on the PRI website. and it's a great resource as you're putting together any plans that you may have as a track operator, or if you want to see what some of the other folks are doing as well. That has been a great tool for us to help build toolkits to bring to different constituents all across the country as needed for their discussions with whether it's a state organization, a local organization, or even down to the people right in that city. We're working with them using many of those tools. One of the things that we've learned and has become an important part of this program and this challenge has been creating a common voice or a common value of getting the track operators, getting the different people involved in the sport across a certain state, all speaking with the same voice. I think Christian said it best. We want to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table so that they're not on the menu, and that we can continue to have those communications with whichever governmental agency we need to address the COVID issue. And one of those success stories was in the state of Illinois, where with the work of a couple track operators, and specifically Chris Blair at Gateway, we put together all of the track operators in the state of Illinois and formed the Illinois Motorsports Coalition. That coalition worked together to put together a concise and detailed reopening plan that has been presented both to the governor's office of Illinois, to the departments of health, to the Department of Commerce, all through those steps, and has become the roadmap for the various local, county, or community health departments to use as they deal with the facilities in their area. Illinois has been a great success in that aspect, that we've now given them something to go forward with, rather than standing back and saying, well, what are you going to do to me? We've come forward with this document and said, this is what our plan is. This is how we're being thoughtful. This is how we're being careful. This is the resource that we're using to open up our venues. And it has been accepted across the state of Illinois. We duplicated that in the state of New Mexico as well, with giving the state the Recovery Council of New Mexico a document in their hands that they could see to opening up the venues all across the state. Unfortunately, New Mexico is one of those that has been a little bit more of a challenge. But using that same principle, and with the guidance of the ambassadors and Jamie, and with the leadership of Christian in the Washington, D.C. office, we've talked to Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, Kentucky, all different track operators, a whole bunch of states, and have put together or helped them with toolkits of various components that they could bring together to present to their governmental agencies to move forward. So it's been a good effort. We've had some great successes, but we still have a long way to go. And as we all know, the pandemic that we're involved in, and all the restrictions and discussions and opinions seem to change every day. So it's nothing that we can sit back on. We're full wide open on it, and we're here as a resource for you as we go forward.
Tom, really appreciate that. Appreciate your work. Christian, do you want to talk a little bit about Illinois? I like how Tom positions that as how we've used it as a roadmap for other states. Do you want to comment on the DC office's work there and what we've learned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Tom really touched on two things. It was one, the ability of the tracks in Illinois to speak in a collective voice. When an industry can come together and self-regulate, it makes it a lot easier for government officials, whether it's at the state level or at the county level, to be accepting of your proposal to reopen. It shows that you're willing to be a partner and a team player with them as opposed to an adversary. So step one, obviously having a good bedrock plan in place to get back to racing, to show how you're going to be a responsible business community, is number one, and wins you a lot of brownie points with government officials. And each of these tracks have huge consumer bases. They were able to tap social media to generate thousands of letters to the governor's office and to key members of the legislature to get the message heard. Everyone was singing off of the same sheet of music. When everything can come together like that, you can have real successes like in Illinois.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Great work, gentlemen. Tom, I want to thank you. I think a great point you made is this work is going to continue for quite some time. So thank you for the work you've done. We'll continue to support these tracks through your ambassadorship.
Thank you. And this is a great program that you're leading, and it certainly shows PRI's commitment to the industry.
Thank you for that. Great team effort. Tom, thank you. We're gonna turn to our next ambassador now, and he is Mr. Gene Bergstrom, who has spent, again, several years at the NHRA, and then now is one of the key players at Steve Wolcott's Pro Media. Gene, I like to say that if you've been to the drag races in the last 25 or 30 years, you probably had a hand in it. Gene, you've been there right with Tom, going track to track, and I appreciate that. Do you want to share a little bit with what's going on out there?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Dr. Meyer. The interesting thing is that, of course, first of all, it's been 42 years. I'm starting my 43rd season in motorsports. That just tells my age. But in that time, we've had many challenges in the motorsports with fuel shortages and one thing after another. This one is probably the most challenging I've seen in 42 years because it is so diverse and it has taken up so many track operators. It has not left anybody out that does not have to face the challenge. Everybody has to face this challenge. And I think Christian can speak to this too. What I'm seeing right now is, in the beginning, with the New Mexico Coalition and the Illinois Coalition, it was a collective effort was easily more obtainable because it was state government more involved. It seems to me now it is starting to break down, where governors are pumping out executive orders one right after the other, and some contradicting the other, and leaving it to local municipalities and to govern and determine what the law means and how to enforce it. So one of the things I've been trying to discuss with track operators is, first of all, stay connected with your community. Some are well connected, they're involved in their chamber of commerce. So you have, when you get in these kind of scenarios, you have an ally to turn to that can help you navigate the problems and the difficulties. Secondly is connecting with local governments and making connections there so that you have know who the enforcement portion of these executive orders, who's going to enforce them, and who determines. And it's generally one individual, and you need to root out who that individual is. And we've had several incidents where Christian has helped me find those people and try to give them an action plan. And sometimes we're going to have to approach this on a shotgun basis, one-on-one, track by track, and their individual difficulties that they're facing, because they are facing an individual who decides, I've got to enforce this rule, and there's contradictory rules or executive orders by the governor. So it's very complicated process, but one that I think the ambassador group and PRI in general can help them navigate it. Because as DEERY said, as Tom said, we have action plans in place. You can take those and they're easily modified to fit your local program, and you need to make sure you have one. I've seen some track operators who have put events together and then realized, first of all, they have no action plan. Secondly, they've made themselves aware to the local enforcement agency, and all of a sudden they end up canceling the event, which is a very difficult thing to do because it has a long-term ramification. It sends a panic mode through the racing community, and of course the rumor mill begins that the end is near, and it's not. And so you have to mitigate that by first of all knowing who's going to enforce the rules and exactly what you need to do, and you need to be proactive, not reactive, and not say I'm going to run an event and then find out you're not ready to do that. And we've seen too much of that. And again, there are some things out there that we can help them with showing the economic impact of their facility on their community, and the Chamber of Commerce can help them with that. And that's why they need to be involved. But
Gene, let me ask Christian a question. I want to go over that one more time. Christian, if a track calls PRI and says, I need help identifying the local official that is shutting down my facility, can PRI help them with that, Christian?
Absolutely. You know, we know we may not have a direct relationship with the health department in every single jurisdiction, but we know where to go look to find out the right person to get your plan of attack, your reopening plan into their hands. And as Gene mentioned, you know, we can help you build a relationship with them if you don't have one already, because having a positive relationship with them, with your local officials, and being proactive is, as we're learning, is tremendously important.
Yeah. Gene, you've got some examples of those relationships. Do you want to share them this afternoon, or one of them?
Well, we had a situation just recently where a track operator ran an event in compliance with the executive order, but they had a winter circle photo that was huge, and of course there was no social distancing in place, and that raised the awareness of a local official, who then sent a letter and said you were in violation of the rules. Well, now you've raised the red flag without having a plan in place prior to this, and we're unaware of who was going to be enforcing that action. And Christian has helped lead us back to this person and see if we can mitigate, first of all, what's transpired, and secondly, put a plan in place for the future, so that this track operator can function. And different than circle tracks, drag strips, for the most part, depending on their size, can operate with backgate or competitor-based events. A lot of circle tracks, and I've only been involved in a few. Tom probably is more addressed to that than I am, but I have operated a few of them in my time, are more front gate oriented to survive. So your plan of action is much, much different based on the size of your facility. And for some tracks, they have one or two large events, which contributes to maybe 40 or 50% of the total gross income for the facility. So you need to be prepared to be able to say, okay, I can do this weekly. And because you're doing it on a weekly basis with small events, you think I'm in compliance and nobody's bothering me, I'm okay. And so you think you can just go on and do the large events. And that's what's transpired in recent weeks, is they said, well, everything's been fine here. We've been running and nobody said anything. We're doing good. Until you step outside that boundary line that is magically set, which you may or may not even be aware of what it is. And that's the complicated part about this, the COVID-19 and the response problems are that we don't know exactly what the rules are. It's a moving target. They're moving constantly, and you have to be aware of them on a daily basis. And that's where the connection with the local authority and the enforcer is a very, very important process, because at least you have a communication level and say, this is what I want to do next week. This is the plan I have in place. Am I in compliance? And will I be able to run this event? And track operators need to be reconnected with their community, or they will find some difficult times ahead of them through this. And of course, we have some tracks now that totally shut down for the season. They've just given up. And I understand that, because they can't run those large events. And it's such a big portion of their operating expenses or operating income that it's better for them just to shut down. And we don't want to see that. That's unfortunate for the industry as a whole.
Gene, some really good advice. Know your boundaries and work with your local officials, and you and the ambassadors and Christian and PRI are standing by to help. So Gene, I want to thank you as the work continues for the PRI ambassadors, and appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you. And I just want to stress to all the operators that we're here to help. We're here to try to help them navigate through this process. I've been through a lot of things like this in the past, and hopefully I can give them some sound advice, not only on navigating this, but events that maybe they could produce that would fall within that, but yet generate some decent revenue. I've done some pretty unusual events in my lifetime, so and I think Frank is even going to speak a little bit to that. So anyway, thank you for the time. I think this program's a wonderful program, and tribute to the PRI to try to help the track operators navigate this issue.
Thank you, Gene. Thanks for being such a big part of it. So that's Gene Bergstrom. He's out there working with the PRI Ambassador Program. Let's go to our third ambassador, the one and only Mr. Frank HAWLEY, runs the official Frank HAWLEY Drag Racing School. I'm actually a graduate of that program. He signed my NHRA license in 2000. And obviously Frank has deep relationships with track operators around the country, around the world. And Frank, first of all, thank you so much for your work with the PRI Ambassador Program. And I think you're going to talk a little bit about how track operators may be able to make some money through some non-traditional paths today. But welcome once again, and please share some of your experience with the folks today.
Hey, thanks, Jamie. So as we've been going through this, and I've been talking to a number of the different track operators, but I've been talking to individual track operators my whole life as a result of racing and the racing school. A lot of times you can feel like you're alone and by yourself, and maybe you've got one friend in another state that's got a track. I think that right now is a time when the tracks ought to look at this program, and hopefully if you become aware of this program, you can share it with other folks that have the racetrack, and this becomes kind of a community meeting room where we can all get together and discuss ideas. Right now, this is pretty much kind of an introduction to what we're doing, but I see it eventually as a place where all the tracks can go and talk about a lot of different things, and the ideas that I get come from other people. They're not necessarily original ideas. So I want to, Jamie, I really want to thank you for coming up with this idea, putting it together, and asking me to be a part of it. So my association with the tracks, I just mentioned, as a professional racer in top fuel dragsters, nitro funny cars, and many years in the semi-pro categories before that, took me to 100 racetracks across the United States. And then for about the last 3 decades, we've been operating a drag race driving school that Jamie had referenced. And so we are always in contact with the tracks. We're renting the tracks, and we go to a lot of different facilities. And so that gave me an opportunity to start making some calls to people I already had relationships with. And one of the things that I think I'd like to share with folks is everybody can have their own political views or world views or whatever they want on what's going on and what should be done and how we ought to do it. And that's all fine. But there's an old adage that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And I don't know if that's the thing we ought to be doing right now. I think that compliance is something that's really crucial. Each of the speakers before me has talked about the importance of this, the renegade approach to it, that I'm just going to go out. It's the wild, wild west. I'm going to take care of things myself. I don't think we've seen that work very well. And what we ought to be doing is looking at past experiences and trying to learn from that. So, when you get advice from, Christian or any one of the folks here about what's been done and how to do it and how to best make use of the resources, you really want to try and follow a plan. And again, if we can get enough of the racetracks around the country to coordinate a lot of their efforts through this PRI program, then everybody's speaking with a similar voice, and I think it becomes a lot more powerful. Just a couple notes here on some things I've run across recently that I thought were pretty creative. Maybe they weren't the people that invented these, but my friend Jim Hughes and Matt DeYoung out in Tucson, they started doing drive-in movie theater stuff at their racetrack. And I didn't even know you could do this, but you can rent these big, giant, inflatable movie screens, and you get a projector. And because the people stayed in their cars, they were allowed by the health department. They were naturally socially distancing. They were allowed a lot of folks in. And they said it was really easy to get a contract with Disney, and they did a couple kids movies. And they sold out the first 2 times they did that. I don't know how much anybody listens to the radio, but Garth Brooks and his folks jumped on this thing a couple months ago and did a concert. And they went to all the movie theaters across the country, and it was a split. The theater didn't have to put up any money, and they had concerts. And Jim and Matt put together a Garth Brooks concert on their movie theater thing in their parking lot at the racetrack, and it sold out. So, those guys are really, you can rent stuff, you can buy stuff, but it's just a fun idea. Another thing that obviously is going to need the ability to put spectators in the stands. Jim Livingston up at Columbus, and I think Gene in another conversation mentioned he had done this before. They've got a hillbilly drag race, and the premise is that you've got 2 basically demolition cars that stage up against one another, and they're just going to drag race to the finish line, but the rules require them to ram into each other at least once past the 60-foot clock. Now, I'd never heard of anything like that. I guess they've run a couple, but I surveyed everybody in my shop, and I asked them, would you pay $20 to watch something like this? And everybody in the shop said, absolutely, where's the next one? So there's an idea how you can run a drag race that's a little bit different than a conventional bracket race. Now, as far as we go with our driving school, we go to a lot of different racetracks around the country. We're unique in that we bring our own insurance, we bring our own staff. All we require them is to set it up, prep the track, turn the timing system on. We don't require any staff throughout the day. And I found out in talking to a number of the racetracks that they, in the midst of all the shutdown, were allowed to have private rentals, but they were limited to, 25 people or whatever. They found that there were car clubs or groups, hot rod groups that literally would pay a reasonable amount of money to come out and have a private track rental. But I knew that was always available. One of the things that I found out is that apparently most of the people racing or with hot rods don't know that you can rent your local racetrack. And again, it's really, you don't have to have many people there. So it might be something that's compliant and a revenue source when you're waiting for everything to get back open again. The Bandemere family up in Denver, they've been doing their high school programs for years. They've got a lot of folks involved in that. Again, that's going to require the lifting of some restrictions, but boy, what a great opportunity to take your local racetrack and interact with the community, at the high school level. The last thing I wanted to mention here that I've become familiar with, and there's 2 or 3 tracks doing this, is with the non-contact, the importance of no contact anymore. At the drag strip, we're constantly handing out these time slips after every run. There's a gentleman, he's actually from Canada, and he has developed an app where you can have paperless ET slips. They just come to your phone. His website is Dino Geek. DYNOGEEK.com. And, the cool thing about that is it's kind of techy. There's nobody racing now that doesn't have a phone that you couldn't get this information on. There's more information provided on it than you would get on a regular ET slip. And you're not handling paper. You're not handing stuff to the racers. You don't have an employee at the ET booth. So it's just something you might want to consider. Again, I've talked to a couple racetracks that have already implemented that. They said the first week was actually a little rough as everybody was trying to figure out how to use the app, but there's some good stuff on YouTube that teaches you how to do that. And they said by the second event, everybody loved it. So I hope we're providing a service here, but I'm actually having a pretty good time talking with all these folks because American ingenuity is so cool. And we've got a lot of really smart people out there that basically have to learn and earn a living, and they're figuring out how to do it. And I would like to have this program a place where folks can share ideas, can call, talk to us about them, and then we can pass them along. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing from anybody that has specific questions. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. You can contact me through PRI, or you can just get a hold of myself, and I can get you in touch with those folks. But we're looking forward to having as good a rest of the year 2020 as we possibly can, and hopefully have a really great 2021. So Jamie, again, I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to work with you guys on this project, and I'm looking forward to getting a lot of stuff accomplished.
Frank, I really appreciate your help and all the experience and your network that you're bringing to the table. Christian, Frank touched on several things. I thought I might ask you about the relationship with racetracks and other facilities during a lockdown and some of these alternative forms of income for racetracks. Can you talk a little bit about racetracks versus movie theaters or baseball parks and some of the clarification work that you've been doing on behalf of the racetracks?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. So many of these orders that we've seen, they're all unique. There's 50 different states and 50 different orders, and even in some of those states, you have counties putting their own orders in place. And unfortunately, there's not one set definition for what is considered an outdoor venue or a sporting venue. And in some of these states, that has presented some issues where we've had to really dig in and work with governor's offices and to get interpretation of the different rules. And then see, when they've put up legal roadblocks, talk to the different counties and see how they're being enforced, which is one of the areas. It can be all very confusing. One of the areas that where we can position ourselves to really help out track operators is getting clarification on local rules, state rules, to make sure that they're classified properly. We've been working with a track in Wisconsin that is, instead of being considered a place of amusement, has been labeled as an entertainment venue, which you wouldn't believe it, but has severe ramifications in terms of how you can allow spectators to come in. So that's one of the areas where PRI is uniquely positioned with its government affairs staff to help out, and is get clarification so that you're in the best position possible to reopen.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Christian. Folks, Frank also mentioned some of the touchless technology that's being developed. In a future video, PRI is working to put together more information on that. We'll bring Frank and Jean back in, and we'll talk about some of the technology solutions that this great industry is coming up with to deal with some of the limitations that Frank and Christian just mentioned. So, Frank, I want to thank you for being a PRI ambassador. Thank you for your great representation out there and fighting to get our racetracks back open all across the country. So thank you for everything, sir.
Thanks, Jimmy. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, buddy. And let's move on to our next slide. We'll wrap this up. Again, to reiterate, PRI is here to help you folks. We're helping our racetracks all across the country. We've got a brand new website up at performanceracing.com. You'll find all of those features and benefits to help you get your track up. You also find your race operator or track operator hotline there, so you can reach Christian's office and check that out. Lots of information there. All right, next slide. And I think that's a wrap. Again, folks, I'm Dr. Jamie Meyer on behalf of PRI and all the folks at PRI. I want to wish you the very best. Please stay safe out there during these times. Thank you to Christian Robinson, and thanks to the PRI ambassadors, Tom DEERY, Gene Bergstrom, Frank HAWLEY. We're out there working for you folks. Stay safe and happy racing. Thank you.